What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. I am a fight guy, a Forbes contributor, and I also write for Heavy.com. And I'm here with my fellow fight guy, fellow Forbes contributor, as well as 2019 Manager of the Year candidate, Peter Kahn. How you doing today, Pete?
I'm doing fantastic, Brian. How are you doing?
I am great, man. We are powered by Fight TV and also presented by Bet Online. If you're watching this video on Fight TV, make sure you go over to YouTube and search The Fight Guys. Subscribe to the channel. We have tons of MMA, boxing, and WWE content there. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for more on that. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, head over to the Fight TV app and subscribe there because they have their own collection of combat sports content as well. So what do you say we go into round one, Pete?
Let's go for it. Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about the UFC. Man, I have to tell you, I know a lot of people, they really come down on Dana White because he's such a shrewd businessman. If you look up the term shrewd businessman in the dictionary, Dana White should literally be standing there like this, right? And I'm sure he would take that label very proudly.
Sure.
But you gotta admire somebody who, in some ways, right? This dude just, like, you're not gonna tell this dude no. He's just not gonna stop. And Vince McMahon is just like him. So the UFC may be returning on May 9th. They've already announced the card. The location is to be announced again or to be determined. But there's indications out there that it'll be done at the UFC Apex Center in Vegas. But there's also a chance there could be some stuff happening in Florida because of the new essential business law that has been passed. The first person to break in with it was Vince McMahon with the WWE, because that's where the Performance Center is in Orlando. So there's been some things there. And I know you have some actual firsthand information because you are a Florida resident doing things down there as far as on the boxing side. So I know you know some stuff about this. I can't wait to hear your side on this.
So yeah, there was an executive order in Florida that was signed yesterday from, I guess, the Department of Emergency Services that, and look, I'm paraphrasing here, but the gist of it is as follows. They're going to deem that the combat sports and professional athletes participating in combat sports would be considered essential, and therefore they would be able to participate in events from a production standpoint, a support standpoint, and a talent standpoint, as long as it was done in a non-public environment. So that really just opens the door for shows to resume in the state of Florida. It could be UFC, it could be boxing, it could be bare knuckle. All of it's on the table, as long as it took place in an environment that did not include a live gate and audience. Very similar to what we saw with the WWE and WrestleMania, where it was in front of a studio, basically in a studio for televised purposes only. Look, this is huge for combat sports fans, but it's also more huge for combat sports participants, because if these guys can get back to work and they can train and compete in a healthy and safe environment, and then be able to perform, get paid, and have millions of people in essence around the world have the opportunity to see them do so, then look, I mean, it's a blessing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I had mentioned this on one of our previous shows, how, as someone who covers the sport for multiple outlets, does it in a freelance sort of a format, while you absolutely prioritize keeping people safe, the one thing about it is when there's nothing to cover, it impacts every aspect of the industry. It impacts the performers, it impacts the workers who work at the different arenas, the promoters, the networks who depend on this content. And it also impacts the media who writes about these events. So by all means, I welcome the return of boxing, return of MMA. And the other thing, from a psychological standpoint, while it won't look the way it has looked in the past and the way people are used to, it still represents some element of normalcy, and I think psychologically that may be one of the most significant and potentially negative impacts of what's going on right now in the world, is because so much is out of whack. So much is, it's just not normal. I was telling somebody the other day, it's one thing to be a homebody like I am. I'm a type of person that likes to be at home. It's one thing to be at home by choice. It's another thing to feel like every time you walk out of the house, you're doing something you may or may not, may or may not should be doing. So just anything that represents normalcy, I think, is welcomed as long as they can be done safely.
Right. But let's also be real here. It's been 6 weeks. Actually, it's been a month. It's been a month since Top Rank came forward and canceled the Shakur Stevenson card and the Michael Conlan card.
Right.
It's been a month. First, it was going to be a 2-week quarantine. Then it got extended.
Right.
I understand it's dangerous out there. Believe me, I don't take it lightly. I don't want to be in danger. I don't want anyone else to be in danger. But let's also understand that, May 9th is over 3 weeks away. Okay, if in fact that takes place. And any boxing matches at this point with fighters that haven't been able to train realistically would be taking place maybe in, the earliest, the end of June, probably mid-July. Best case scenario. Right. So we're still looking at this isn't too soon. I mean, people have still been out of business for 3+ months. So, there is a point where we do need to resume in a safe environment and just, find ways to mitigate risk and keep everyone healthy. But the show must go on.
Right, absolutely. The show absolutely has to go on, and because it's there's so many different people's livelihood that is attached to this. And that's the reason why at some point, in some ways people look at it and say, oh, it's boxing or it's MMA. Nobody has to do that. Well, boxing and MMA may not be an essential thing in terms of life and death and just in the overall scheme of things. But if there are people whose jobs and whose ability to pay their rent and their mortgage and keep their lights on and so forth are connected to this sport, then them losing their job or being placed on some version of furlough is just as impacting to them as the person who works at a grocery store, or not a grocery store, at a department store that's been deemed non-essential. And those people are laid off and experiencing some financial trouble. So I don't want to diminutize, combat sports just simply because it's entertainment, because those people have to eat too, just like everyone else. So I think that part of it really has to be remembered throughout, this entire thing. So it's going to be interesting. And like I said, I'm hoping that this can go over safely. Do you know what if any of the security measures are going to be in place? Will everyone need to be tested? How's that going to work?
So, I don't have any type of formal, written thing to go off of, but I did speak with the executive director of the Florida Commission, and, they're going to adhere to the 50-person, I guess, maximum, in one place, I guess, congregating, and that would include participants, production, commission officials. And I think as long as they're properly partitioned, then, they might be able to have another set of 50, depending on if they were separated, depending on the type of venue. I definitely think they can make it work. I definitely think they'll come out with some guidelines, but at some point, and to Dana White's credit, he's a businessman. His job is to stay in business, even while dealing with a pandemic, even in such a, in a time of uncertainty, in a time where people don't know really what the future holds and how it's going to affect everybody moving forward. Look, Fight Island, I think, is a brilliant idea, right? I think it's a great idea as far as a short-term solution. Ultimately, without having fans down the road, it's not going to be such a great idea. However, for the foreseeable future, it's definitely something that I think could work. And look, I'm just hoping to see us back in action pretty soon.
Absolutely. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and move into our first between the rounds. And I have something I gotta kind of touch on, and this is in relation to boxing. Terence Crawford. I'm noticing, I don't know, and I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this in the championship rounds. But I am noticing a much more outspoken and direct, and dare I say, a tad bit aggressive Terence Crawford. And I mean that mostly in a good way, right? Because it seems like he's building fights so much more so maybe with just some of the things that he said. And I'm going to tell you kind of what I mean, right? Now, Terence has never been one, I would say, to back down from someone coming at him or whatever. But I'm just noticing a little bit of a difference here. Like, so I believe it was Jermell Charlo, started to talk a little bit. He mentioned Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford simply tweeted at him, "Keep my name out your mouth." That's a little bit unlike what he's done on social media most of the time. Here and there, you'll see a little bit of that. But one thing that really kind of stuck out to me is that he said that he was confident that in his mind that when and if he fights Errol Spence, he's going to F him up. And that was I'm like, so every single layer, he went on Chris Mannix's show and he was talking very freely, shared a lot of opinions. Some of them weren't that popular. He just did this is a different side of Terence Crawford. And I can't say that I can't say I don't like it. It's just very interesting. And I'm kind of watching, how people use the popcorn emoji, like watch the show. I'm kind of watching to see how this is going to evolve, what's going to happen, especially once quarantine's over. And now it's time to actually start making these fights, because we're saying and we're mentioning a lot of people. But are we going to see these fights, take place, or are we just going to be still picking from the scraps that are left at Top Rank for Terence Crawford in and around his weight class? So I'm really waiting to see what happens for him at that point. But that is my rant, and like I said, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. But let's go into round two. Devin Haney. We're talking about talking, right? Mm-hmm. And Devin Haney's doing plenty of it. So he said that he's eyeing Ryan Garcia. He's open to Mikey Garcia and Broner at 140 pounds. So that's 3 different call outs. Right there. So I think you may have some thoughts about this whole thing about Devin Haney and who he's calling out and who he might not be mentioning. What's your take on that?
Look, first of all, I like Devin Haney, right? And I'm not pandering now, okay? Mm-hmm. And for you casuals out there that like to go in the comments, and we'll get into this later, and think you know what you're talking about.
Right.
I actually work in the business, and I know these people that we talk about. I know all of them. I know every single one of them, and I know them personally. And so I like Devin. I like his dad, Bill. I understand the mindset. I understand what he's trying to do. But I also think that when you sit around in quarantine for a month and there's no plan as to what you're going to be doing down the road and who you could be fighting, and you see all these other guys competing to make these big fights, you just want to get in on the action. So it's almost like a Royal Rumble, right? You got Gervonta calling out Garcia calling out Gervonta. Then you have now Devin saying he'll fight Garcia, or he'll fight Broner at 140, which I don't even know where that came from, right? That's just Broner hasn't fought since Pacquiao beat him, okay? And now you're talking about fighting him at 140. Why don't you fight somebody at 135 that we actually know first? Then we can talk about you fighting some names at 140, former world champions. Why don't you fight one of the world champions? Oh, the answer is going to be, well, I'm down for it. I'm ready to fight. Well, then make the fights, right? And every time these conversations come about, I think sometimes guys are a lot bigger when they know that from a promotional standpoint, some of these fights aren't going to get made. And I think that if one of the fights, I do believe a Haney-Garcia fight has an easier time being made just because it's all in the family with Matchroom, DAZN, and Golden Boy.
Yeah.
So
Ryan
that's
Garcia. You're talking Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan Garcia.
Because he called out Mike.
Okay. Well, I mean, Mikey Garcia also with his working relationship, I guess, with Matchroom. But let's stick to 135. Let's fight somebody that we can then say, there's your victory, Devin. There's the victory where you can go do the lap and hold the belt and say that you beat somebody. Yeah. Because you tell me, Brian, who's Devin Haney beaten? Hey, listen, I manage Emmanuel Tago.
Yeah.
Okay. And let me tell you something. Tago's ready to give him that work.
Yeah.
Right now. And look, I don't know if listen, Bill Haney text messaged me months ago saying, hey, how about Tago against Devin for the WBC title? I said, great. Except, it was for the November 9th show, but it was only 3.5 weeks notice.
Right.
I'm like, nah, you know what? First of all, let's get him. We'll get Tago in camp. We'll do a full camp, and then we're happy to beat Devin Haney. So I'm just giving you an example that a lot of guys are sitting around and they're just talking and they're calling people up because they want to stay relevant and they don't know what else to do because normally they get up, they do their road work, they come back, they go to the gym, they train, they do some interviews, they have a goal, they have a date. Right now they have nothing. So the best thing they can do is go on social media and call each other out.
Yeah. And to be honest, thank God for that, because if they weren't, I don't know what people would be talking about and covering, but I totally agree. Devin Haney's 21 years old. He hasn't beaten anybody. If you can argue which is his best win, a victory over Juan Carlos Burgos, which is not the same guy anymore, or Antonio Moran. Either of those wins or anything that are going to super impress anybody. And as I said, he's only 21. I do think that the Ryan Garcia call out makes perfect sense. They're both around the same age bracket. They both have about the same level of experience. Neither of them have this signature victory on their record yet. Right. But I think that he's overstepping his bounds a bit, calling out Mikey. And to be totally honest, I can't even believe I'm about to say this. He's even overstepping his bounds, calling out Broner.
Right.
Because Broner has accomplished far more than he has. Broner has fought far better fighters than he has. And then, as you mentioned, it's also one of those things where you're on the other side of the promotional bracket, on the other side of the promotional landscape. The chances of you fighting Broner, it's not impossible, but yeah, it's not likely to happen. But here is the one thing. If Broner is going to take a fight against someone across from another promotion, Devin Haney might be the kind of guy he'd fight, smaller, coming up in weight, to fight him. That would be the type of fight I would think that Broner might be interested in if he was going to do something like that. It'd be a great name for Broner to fight if he could beat him, that kind of re-inject some light, because Broner needs that. Broner can. I know he draws because he is a controversial character, and you either love him or you hate him. It's kind of that sort of thing. But I don't know that he can survive another loss and continue to be taken seriously, especially to a kid who's 21, 22 years old who came up from 135. Right.
Agreed. But I got to tell you this. I think Adrian Broner on his game right now defeats Devin Haney.
I wouldn't say that's crazy. I wouldn't say that's crazy at all.
He's bigger, experience. It's everything. Yeah. It's the experience. He's bigger. And I think Devin Haney hasn't had that step up fight where he can say, okay, I just beat a guy that now puts me in that conversation. But let's just stay focused and look at the actual landscape. So the WBC, I guess, mandated that Luke Campbell and Fortuna have to fight.
Javier Fortuna, yeah.
Right, have to fight. If Campbell wins that fight, I mean, he's with Matchroom. Haney's with Matchroom. This is an easy fight to make.
Yeah.
But Devin Haney needs somebody in the meantime.
Yeah.
And it's got to be
a bigger name than that.
Yeah, he's tired of walking the red carpet and getting interviewed while these YouTubers fight. Okay.
Yeah.
He wants to be the headline in a world championship fight against a legitimate opponent.
So you mean he doesn't want to be the guest analyst on another Logan Paul fight? He doesn't want to do that.
Exactly. Okay. And you know, I'm just gonna say at Miami Fight Night, I was in the VIP lounge area, and I'm hanging over the balcony with Bill, his dad, and we're talking. He goes, "What do you think of these YouTubers?"
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, "They got a lot of followers. Probably brings a lot of subscribers to the zone."
Yeah.
And he said, because look, they're using those shows as a way to help build Devin's profile to a younger audience.
They are, yeah.
Which is not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea.
But he wants to be known as the guy in the ring who's beating people that are credible. Listen, he's only 21. I don't doubt that he has a big career ahead of him. Yeah. I mean, he's a talented kid. I mean, he's got all the tools, right? All the tools. But for what we're talking about right now, it's like, it reminds me of, you remember the movie Colors, right? We've talked about this before. When Robert Duvall and Sean Penn are sitting there and he talks about the Papa Bowl and the Baby Bowl. And I think right now what Devin Haney needs to do is, one at a time. One at a time. Okay. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go find that clip on YouTube. We'll leave it in the description because it's a good story. Okay. Yeah. And right now I think that the Baby Bull needs to take his time and fight Emmanuel Tega. Yeah. And you get past Game Boy. Well, then it'll be right in time for you to fight the winner of Fortuna Campbell. Right. Then you start putting your name where you want it. Right. Exactly. I mean, I think it's perfect advice. And I think it's also good for the game, good for the sport, because Devin Haney is only 21 years old, and it's not time to see him in a fight against somebody who he's potentially over his head against. Right. And because that doesn't work well for the future. I mean, I like the Ryan Garcia fight, but I just don't think I like that. I like all right. I think it's too early for that because that could be a huge fight. Yeah, that could be. It will be a huge fight. I think they'll get there one day. Yeah, but not now. Right. Not right now. Not right now. So let us jump into our between the rounds, which is actually, this is for you, Pete. I know you had something to say. The Keith Thurman thing is kind of getting at you a little bit. Let me just buckle in here. Hold on. Keith Thurman. Yes. So look, it's the internet, it's social media. I don't even know if it's true, if he actually said it, right? But let's assume he did say the following, that he wants a rematch with Manny Pacquiao because he wasn't at his best, because he was injured. He wasn't 100%. No, Keith, you got your ass beat. Okay. And if you remember, me, you, and your dad were at your training facility in Tampa, right? And you guys were giving me a hard time for a story that Brian wrote, by the way. That I wrote. Okay. But I somehow got late. So you guys are on me. I have video of it too. I'm there with my family, and Keith's going off and his dad's trying to educate me, right? Keith's a world champion. One time. Okay. One time. Not a world champion now. Yeah. No, I got more experience. I got more experience in this game. More experience in this game than Keith, his dad, and his entire family, and the entire family lineage that's ever going to be. And they're trying to educate me on what it must be. Well, you know what? You signed up for this. If you don't like criticism, whether I wrote it, Brian wrote it, or whoever wrote it, tough shit. You signed up for this. And the bottom line is everybody else fights injured. Nobody's perfect. Right? But what it looks like months later, sitting around whining, complaining that you weren't 100%, boo-hoo, you weren't 100%. Maybe Manny wasn't 100%. I've been around Manny many fight weeks where he's been sick, where he's had a cold, where he's had an abdominal pull, where his hand was hurting him. Okay. Keith, I probably bet you were one of the guys that were calling Manny out when he said he hurt his shoulder against Floyd. I bet you were one of those guys that were probably talking shit when Manny came out and said he was injured after that fight. So that's basically what you sound like. So, you know, whether you like it or not, it's a bad look. And, you know, you had your opportunity, right? And you lost. Mm-hmm. And you didn't look that good. And Manny beat you.
No, it didn't.
Move on. That's it. Over. End the story. And if you and your dad want to complain and argue with me, I'm happy to argue with you. Still think you're a great fighter. I still think you got a lot left. But, you know, you're not getting a rematch with Pacquiao. I'm done.
Well, obviously, I'm going to love to respond to that for sure. Mm-hmm. But we're going to save that one for the championship rounds. For right now, we're going to go into round 3. And round 3, I want to introduce a new segment to the Fight Guys. Mm-hmm. Because generally what we do in round 3 is we like to go into the community, hear what people are saying, either on any of our channels where you can watch us. If you're watching us on Facebook, if you're watching us on YouTube, if you're watching us on Fight TV, we urge you to definitely reach out, comment, talk to us. We want to respond, right? So in the spirit of that, I'm going to start this today. It's called Ask the Fight Guys. So use the hashtag Ask the Fight Guys. Preferably on Twitter. If you do it on Twitter, you see both of our handles on the screen. Use the hashtag Ask the Fight Guys. We will respond to you in show. Obviously, if there's a lot of stuff that's coming through, we'll have to pick and sift through. If you've seen it on YouTube, use it there. Ask the Fight Guys in your comments. We'd love to talk to you. But I gotta say, Peter, we got some stuff already, you know, that's being said now. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna start off with you. I'm gonna let you do your thing here, because we got a comment from someone. His name is Gester, I think is how you want to say it. So he watched the video that we had. We broke it out into individual segments so you can kind of hone in on what some people were saying. But we had a video. Teofimo Jr. talks to Vasyl Lomachenko ducking him and ring rust. Right. So we talked about that when we had Teofimo on the show. And Gester's comment was, this guy Kahn is a lying weasel. So I'm going to ask the lying weasel.
Sure. So what was his name again?
Gester.
More like Jester, because he sounds like a joke. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, he's a clown. So we'll call him Jester, right?
Yes.
This guy Kahn is a lying weasel. Okay. I would imagine this is a Conor McGregor fan. Right, that probably doesn't even watch boxing, because he's using that lying weasel line about Steven Espinoza. Okay, so that's already like, you know, wasn't that if that's the best you got, right? So here's the thing, dude. First and foremost, why in the world would Lomachenko, at 135 pounds, who talks about going back down to 130, call his dream matchup against a retired 41-year-old 147 pounder? I don't even understand what the dream matchup is. What Floyd's retired. Mm-hmm. So like my dream matchup is against Joe Louis. Is dead. I don't understand. Like, I'm not following. Like, so yeah, when you start mentioning people in this game that are not even possibilities, okay, it's because you don't want to fight the guy that you're supposed to be fighting. There should be no other names coming out of Lomachenko's dream matchup right now should be called Teofimo Lopez. That should be his dream matchup. His dream matchup should not be a retired 41-year-old Floyd Mayweather Jr., who's 2 weight classes above him. Mm-hmm. His dream matchup should be the guy standing in his way of becoming the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. So I'm not even sure the lying part. I mean,
I didn't kind of get it. I didn't get it. He said, because he did respond. He said, nope, he's a liar. You can watch. Because I'm gonna say, I commented. I said, actually, he's a pretty stand-up dude with more than 20 years.
Because you like me.
Yeah. Not really, but I gotta still tell the truth.
Right.
With more than 20 years of experience in this sport, right? And I still appreciate you watching. So we're gonna tell you what we're gonna tell you, but we still appreciate you watching for sure. But
yeah, and you're a lying weasel.
Yeah, hey, you know, I've been called worse. I'm
talking about him.
Okay. He says, if you watch the interview where Loma was talking about Floyd, he was answering like a hypothetical question about which fighter from history. But what I want to say to Jester is you're kind of twisting the way the comment was delivered, because Lomachenko spoke about that fight as if it was something that was going to take place in this virtual arena that Floyd is building with the DNA of fighters or whatever it is that he's doing. He didn't speak about it that way. Lomachenko spoke about it in why not? Let's do that fight. Right. And you know why he did that is because he was throwing it out there.
It's
because
called bait, baby.
Exactly, because he knows Floyd flirts with the idea of coming back. Right. And he also probably knows that Floyd might choose to fight him. That might be something that he would do because he's smaller. And if Floyd was going to take any type of quote unquote risk, it would be against somebody who has a name, who he knows also doesn't pose, or he would think doesn't pose a threat. So I think there's a little bit more validity to the statement than what Jester is leading on.
And one more thing. By the time Lomachenko were to fight Teofimo Lopez, he'll have been inactive for over a year. He probably would rather roll the dice, make a lot more money, fight a guy like Floyd Mayweather Jr., who's also been quite inactive as well, and take that risk because he always has that built-in excuse. Oh, well, you know, he's too big. Yeah, I took a shot. He's too big. And remember, Lomachenko's already lost. So, you know, and he wouldn't give him the rematch.
No, he wouldn't.
I don't think, listen, I stand by what I'm telling you. I don't think he wants to fight Teofimo Lopez. I don't think it's a fight he wants. I think that when he sprinkles these things out there, it's because he might be, you know, throwing out a little hope.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. And I'm sure Peter probably feels the same way.
Listen, disagree with me, but if you're going to call me a lying weasel, then I'm going to have to let you know a few things.
You got to know a few things. Don't get us wrong. I believe we both think that Lomachenko is a phenomenal fighter.
Of course,
so nobody's trying to say that Lomachenko's not a great fighter.
Listen, he's the odds-on favorite to beat Lopez. Maybe he beats him. But it's not even the point. That's not the point of this comment.
It's not the point. The point is he is going to be experiencing quite a bit of ring rust. He's significantly older, and he has been evasive when talking about Teofimo Lopez. It's really just that simple.
Yeah.
It's really just that simple. So you can say what you want, but Peter, you know what we did?
What do we do?
I'm going to tell you something, Jester. While your comment was a little crazy and coloring outside of the lines, I'm going to give you credit. You helped create a new segment.
Yeah, exactly.
On this show. And
he could be the sponsor. Thank you, by the way.
Peter, what's the name of the segment that he created? What just happened?
I mean, ask the fight guys.
Well, no. Jester, you just got TKO'd.
Oh, yeah, you got TKO'd.
You just got TKO'd.
Just got waved off. Sorry about that.
It's waved off. They waved off the count. They waved off the count. You were swinging and missing, and you got caught.
Yeah.
You got swinging and missing, you got caught. Now, but Peter's not the only object of some sort of reckless comment. So I had someone, I got to remember his name, the pronunciation, the way his name looks, it just looks like it reminds me of Neapolitan ice cream, but that's not his name. But the gentleman took a shot.
What's his name? God forbid anyone ever uses their real names on here.
Oh, actually, you know, the funny thing of it was this particular gentleman looked as though he did actually use his real name. His name is Robert Napolitano. Napolitano, probably.
Okay.
And so he says, Brian Mazique, that would be this particular brown person, is no expert on MMA. McGregor made $2 million for his fight against Cerrone. Jones makes approximately $500,000 per fight.
Approximately.
He says that I'm stuttering over my words and I am inventing some nonsense. Well, Bob.
Nappy.
Bob, first and foremost, the money that you're quoting is what is reported to the commissions for the purse.
Yeah, newsflash.
And that information is never all inclusive when talking about how much a fighter earns. With the UFC, there are so many other factors, and we're just talking about the UFC because it's the same way in boxing. But in UFC, there's also the Reebok sponsorship deal and depending on your tenure, you get a piece of that. There's also their new variation of pay-per-view points, which because they're not in a traditional pay-per-view format anymore, they still have a variation of that. And next week, I'm hoping to have Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson on, and he wants to explain to me how the pay-per-view points work for the UFC. And I'm going to see if I can get him to talk about that again for this particular show. So that you, Bob, and anyone else who questions, how or wants to know how you calculate how much a fighter makes per fight, will then be educated. And I'm going to see if we can get Demetrius Johnson to speak straight through it without stumbling over his words.
So, but I have a question for you.
Believe him more.
So what did you say, is he arguing that McGregor got paid more or less and that Jones got paid more or less? What was he arguing?
So he was saying essentially that Jones only, the McGregor only made $2 million. Versus...
we
don't know exactly what he made because he came out initially and
versus what the initial idea of what he made, which was what?
15 million. That's the 15 to 20 million.
Yeah. So Bob doesn't really understand that. Works. Yeah. So Bob, listen to me. I'm gonna talk low here. Okay. Because the commissions take taxes, right? A lot of fighters will put less money on their purses, including the promoter, so that this way they don't get hit with a bigger tax and they'll get a second check. So just letting you know. So anyway, basically, we can revisit this when we have someone that can also talk about it. But I don't think this is, remember what's reported and what guys make are two different things.
Right. So Bob, it's okay. Again, Bob, we appreciate you watching. But guess what? You just got TKO.
TKO, baby.
You're swinging and you're missing and you got caught.
Yeah.
So
come with some better stuff. Seriously,
better, man. Come
on, a little bit more educated.
Ask the fight guys, and we're not gonna TKO everybody. Just Bob.
Hey, if you leave a good comment or you challenge us and you're right, we'll
tell you. We'll say, man.
Brian, I'll tell you, we've been TKO.
Awesome.
But here's the thing: if you're gonna come at us and you're gonna call us a lying weasel.
Yes.
Or you're going to challenge factual information. Just make sure you have the facts.
Just make sure, right? Because
make sure we're lying. Just don't be sitting there typing and It's
kind of what Bob's do. But okay, let's go into the championship round. I am going to answer Peter's rant. He's talking about. And I gotta say,
hey, you saw that before you answered my rant.
Yes.
You saw the video.
I did.
And I didn't appreciate Keith trying to come at me, knowing that I had my wife, my 3 boys there, knowing that he had Marcos there from
Marcos Villegas from
so he was trying to play up to the camera. I didn't appreciate that. And I didn't need his dad educating me. I didn't need Keith Sr. telling me how it works.
Yeah, it's the thing of it is it's.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He initially got, in his feelings or what have you, because the article that I wrote, which was not inflammatory towards him at all, it was really a compliment towards him, because essentially what I said was there was some speculation that was going around that said that after Broner lost to Pacquiao, that they may be trying. This was before I believe Thurman Pacquiao got made, so there was some talk and never validated it. Said this person was saying, I said there was talk that they would match Broner and Thurman together. And I said, I think the title of my article on Forbes was, you would only match Broner with Thurman if you're trying to get rid of the problem. Catchy little headline. It's just my take, right? Obviously, no disrespect to Keith Thurman, but for whatever reason, it seemed as though Broner must have approached Keith Thurman and said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but I guess he's quoting Terence Crawford, keep my name out your mouth or whatever. I don't know if Keith got upset, got nervous behind that. I don't know if Broner had people. I don't know what was going on, but Thurman felt some sort of way because of that and approached Peter, because what most people do, they don't read the entire article. So he read Forbes. He knows Peter is also with Forbes, and he immediately came at him. Everybody thinks like that people write from like the same brain. Forbes has multiple writers. So just because one person writes for Forbes doesn't mean that they represent everybody's opinion under that particular umbrella. That was my article. I wrote that. In any case, do you deserve a rematch with Manny Pacquiao? I could see in most situations, I would say that doesn't sound like a ridiculous fight, right? Because he did a lot of damage to Manny in that fight. I think Manny clearly won, but I think that obviously he found the mark consistent. I mean, just look at the way Manny looked after the fight. You don't see Manny looking like that much after fights, but no question at all, Manny won the fight. If Manny were a younger fighter and Manny's whole setup at this point is not like other fighters. So you can't compare him and his situation and the requirements for a rematch, or the setup for a rematch for Manny is not the same as it would be with someone else. Manny's not into, at this point, rematches with fighters who, quite honestly, when you look at from a status level, if Manny's an A+ level from a status fight, and I'm not even talking about skill levels, I'm talking about draw, which matters. If Manny's an A+, Thurman's a B+. So it doesn't behoove Manny to have a rematch with a B+ fighter when there's so many other opportunities there for Manny to go to, because he's probably not going to fight more than one or two more fights. And who knows how this pandemic is going to affect the rest of his career. So when you consider everything together, no, I don't think Thurman needs to get a rematch against Pacquiao. I think the best thing for Thurman to do is to move on and to fight someone else. You lost to Manny Pacquiao. Shoulder, whatever, you lost. Take that L, move on. We talked about in a previous show, I think it was when Buddy McGirt was on with us, how taking an L should not be the end all be all of a fighter's career. You lost to one of the greatest fighters that ever lived. Take it and move on. That's how I see it. I don't know if you had anything extra to add there, but that's how I see that. Take the L.
I mean, here, I'm going to add this. I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. Or bottom line is what I took issue with was that he deserves the rematch because he was injured going into the first fight. No, you don't deserve the rematch, and don't come out now. If in fact, like I said, I prefaced my between the rounds with,
Well, I can confirm,
okay.
there's an interview that was done with Jake Donovan.
Right.
Of boxing scene.
Okay, so that's credible. If Jake did it, then it's credible. So if Jake did it, Keith said it.
And all of that.
Well, that's just there's plenty of other big fights for Keith. He can become a world champion again, but it's not going to be against Manny Pacquiao. Yeah,
and you know what? Here's the thing: there wasn't a rematch clause in the contract. So I don't know how and what situation he's saying that, because Keith said it, there wasn't a rematch clause.
Mm-hmm. So, listen, Brian, going into that fight, you can go back and look. I mean, even with my odds and best bets, I mean, everything I had for that fight, I had Keith. Mm-hmm. I had Keith across the board. I
had him too.
And it is what it is.
So that's what I'm saying. So if you want to put a comment in this video and say, you guys were wrong about Thurman Pacquiao, you know what?
You're right.
I treat you like Bob, and we will not treat you like Jester, because you would be right. So it's what it is. All right, let's go to the second and the final championship round.
Yes.
I want to hear what you got to say about my take on what's happening with Terence Crawford.
Well, look, the saying, right? An idle mind is the devil's playground. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're sitting around and you just don't have that goal or that fight to look forward to, or the ability to be in camp, I think that you just have more of an opportunity to get in conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You have more of an opportunity, to do more interviews.
Do social media, talking about
everything.
People in the face and getting suspended like Billy Joe Saunders.
Right. But I also think that somebody like Terence, who's not exactly media aggressive, he doesn't initiate a lot of conversations over social media. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He's not the biggest self-promoter. No. I think what happens is when he starts seeing other people using his name to get some shine or to get some ink, I think it's starting to bother him. And look, Bob Arum came out yesterday and said Pacquiao Crawford's a possibility. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know. But the point is that I think that for Terence, I think he's just hearing so many people talk about fighting him. And everybody wants to fight someone when they can't.
Everybody.
You know what I mean? And the other thing is, whether other people are calling him out or saying, well, look, everybody wants a big fight. A lot of guys are sitting home wondering right now when they're getting their next purse, right? When they're getting their next payday. Look, the Terence Crawford that's being more vocal, maybe seeming a bit more aggressive. Well, that's the guy that fights in the ring.
Yes, it is.
I mean, so it's like you're coming at him, and this is how he's
what's going to happen.
This is how he's getting that aggression out right now.
It is.
And that's the guy that you're fighting in the ring. Normally he just, he's the nicest guy in the world, low key, fun to be around, very personable, very fan friendly. I think what's happening is when guys like Jermell Charlo or Errol Spence or even maybe Bob talking about Pacquiao I think all of this is, could be frustrating Crawford. And I think basically the only platform he has to respond is via social media. And I think, what we're seeing is just some of that frustration also come out. But, at the same time, it's so easy for people to call someone out when they know a fight can't be made.
Yeah. And, I think that what you're saying is actually has some validity, because what I started to notice, and I really noticed this, I felt in the Kavaliauskas fight. Terence, as you said, is not a big self-promoter. He's not this type of guy who generally is going to go on social media. He's not calling people out. He's not on Instagram taking pictures on a bed of hundreds and doing anything like that. And every time he go shopping, he's not taking pictures of the bags and all of that. He's not that kind of guy, right? And I think that for many fans, it's a refreshing thing. But at the same token, he knows that he is at least a top 2-3 fighter in the world. He knows that.
Right.
So what has to happen is every single time he steps into the ring, it almost feels as though there's this burden to prove it and to make up for the fact that I'm not gaining ink, I'm not gaining spotlight, I'm not gaining attention doing anything else. I got to make all my fights look a certain way. And I think we even heard Gervonta mention some of that when we were interviewing him, how the people talking about the KO record drive is bringing pressure to him. Well, I think Terence, it looked this way against Kavaliauskas, who is a guy who's a good fighter. But I think from an overall skill standpoint, Terence could have outclassed him in a much safer fight where he didn't have to take shots, didn't have to take what I thought was a legitimate knockdown. He didn't have to do that, but he did it. He put himself out there, made himself vulnerable to create a great fight or to create an action-packed fight.
But this is what he does. I mean, so it's really very, very much in line with his character and how he fights, because he's a very smart fighter. Kavaliauskas is a power puncher. Okay. So, him posing some problems or Terence adapting to avoid that power was not something that was unforeseen. I mean, obviously the question was, could Kavaliauskas find, a home for his power? But just like in true Crawford form, eventually as the fight goes on, he finds the holes, he breaks you down, and then he stops you. And it's exactly what happened in that fight. So it wasn't like, look, they're talking. Look, we were all talking and hearing about him fighting Sean Porter and then fighting Errol Spence. And that would seem like the trajectory. And I think that fighting Porter is going to bring out the best in Terence Crawford, because it's going to be impossible to be a boring fight.
It's impossible. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a boring.
Sean Porter brought out the best in Errol Spence. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning he made him do things that he hadn't had to do yet as a pro. But Sean Porter really put himself back in the conversation as one of the top 3 or 4 welterweights.
Yeah, it was you couldn't have a better loss. Right. Than what Sean Porter
had. And I think that I think him and Crawford would be a very exciting fight.
Oh, I think it's a fantastic fight.
I mean, these two, it's going to be, and you know what? I think that if things could get back on track and that fight could manifest, and then if Crawford could fight Spence, I think we're back on track as to where we need to be. But in the meantime, he's at home like everybody else, and he sees people talking about him.
Yeah.
And I think he's just like, he just wants to bark back.
Yeah, he's on the porch, and it's that dog on the porch, and he's been watching people walk back and forth, and now they're starting to get in his yard a little bit. Right. And it's like, I'm already antsy. I haven't been able to do what I normally would do. So I definitely agree, but I do think that he fought a little bit more than he boxed, especially early against Kavaliauskas. And I what you're saying is right. He did ultimately figure him out, which is what Terence does. To me, that's to me is his greatest strength as a fighter, is his ability to make adjustments on the fly. Not everybody can do that. Very few, a handful of fighters are able to do that. Most guys come out with a plan A, and if you have an answer for their plan A, you're going to beat them that night. It's just what it is. Only few guys have that ability to adjust. I think Terence is definitely one of those guys, and that's what he did. But I think along the way, he put himself in more danger than what he had to do. And I have to feel like he did that because it just looked like he wanted to put on a great fight. Obviously, he wanted to win. Yeah. Obviously, he wanted to win. But it felt like it's almost like you want to beat a guy in a certain kind of way because that. Yeah.
But it is what it is. I mean, with knowing what was looming down the road, I don't think he was going to take any chances either.
I think it's just ultimate confidence, though, in himself. Yeah. I feel like he probably is like, could I beat this guy just standing outside and boxing? Yeah, I could. But I also feel like I'm almost 100% positive I can beat him in this firefight too. And that's who I am. I'm a dog. I'm gonna do that.
So to tie that thought, Brian, to and I'm gonna go back because I just got on this Keith Thurman thing, right? And the guy rubbed me the wrong way earlier. Jester with Lomachenko. So here's one thing I'll point out, which I'm going to digress a little bit, but not really, because it's about being able to adapt. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to overcome. So with Lomachenko, in case you're thinking that we think Lomachenko is not a great fighter, couldn't be any further from the truth. And the example that I will give, and then I'll tie it to Thurman, was this: Lomachenko was injured, I guess his shoulder against Linares.
Against Linares, got dropped.
Got dropped, saw himself on the seat of his pants, and you know what he did? He adapted, and he found a way to stop that guy with a beautiful body shot.
Yes, good fight. I'm talking about Linares.
End the story, right? And if Thurman was hurt, well, he could have adapted. The bigger, stronger, longer man could have adapted and found a way to beat Pacquiao, but he couldn't.
And Lomachenko was a smaller guy than Linares.
Right. So anyway, I'm just saying, and with Crawford, I was at that fight at Madison Square Garden on December 14th. And Crawford was in a real fight against a very credible contender. But that's all that Kavaliauskas was, a contender.
Yes.
And while I understand what you're saying, that he wants to entertain, I think he still has a very methodical way he goes about his business. Mm-hmm. And I think that he understood what he was up against and that it was going to be a matter of more like attrition. Mm-hmm. He was going to have to break this guy down and then put his foot on the pedal and finish it. And ultimately that's what he did.
Yeah, it is what he did. Obviously, he was a better fighter. And I knew that would come out. But I'm always looking at, winning and taking the least amount of damage. And in the game plan or in the way he was executing inside the ring, I'm looking and I'm like, they're fighting in a phone booth and there's no reason why. Kavaliauskas is a smaller guy from a height standpoint. His arms are shorter. He wants to fight on the inside. He's really compact. Terence can beat this guy up from the outside, but it's just like he didn't want to. He didn't want to. And so that was kind of where I got that from. But total just me observing, but that's kind of where I got it from. But I think that this has been fantastic conversation about the combat sports world. We appreciate everybody watching. And again, we urge you, Ask the Fight Guys, hashtag on Twitter, hashtag on YouTube. If you see us on Facebook, do that as well. If you're watching this live on Fight TV, make sure you use it there as well. We'll be happy to comment right now. If you, like I said, during shows, if you want to comment, make sure you do that as well. We will respond. So again, we are powered by Fight TV and presented by Bet Online. It was our pleasure to come to you today from my man, Peter Kahn. As always, we appreciate you watching. God bless.